All right, everyone, welcome to our next workshop. Our next workshop, we're going to be having Daman Cchina. Daman Cchina is a software development engineer at Blue Crew, and he was formerly a software development engineer at Amazon as well. And he happens to be a fellow York University grad, graduating in computer engineering in 2017. So let's without further ado, let's have Daman over. Let's welcome Daman. Hello, Daman. How are you?
Hey, John, I'm doing good. How about yourself?
Good, thank you very much. So let's begin. I guess I would start by asking you some questions. How did you get into computer engineering at York University?
Oh, okay. First of all, yeah, thank you for having me over.
Yeah,
it's been a while since I came to school, but it's always good to come back and talk to York kids. So that's good.
awesome.
With regards to your question, I came to York University in computer engineering as an international student. So computers was, I guess, one of the things that I sort of ended up doing because I like to play a lot of video games, and the only way I guess I would get access to the computer was if I convinced my parents that I was doing something related to the computer. So I guess that actually turned out to be a real job now. So
had the same experience with the video games as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, what was your experience like at York University? Did you like it there?
Yeah, so just correct you, I actually graduated 2019. I came in 2014.
Sorry, 2019. My apologies.
Yeah, that's okay. We just it hasn't been that long, but it's pretty good. I didn't have to go through the pandemic, I guess, like a lot of students at York right now, which is very unfortunate. But I had a great time at York. It was a very, very different experience, especially for an international student coming from India. It's a completely different, total overhaul. Learn a lot about the country, learn a lot about people here, different cultures, and
Sorry, I think it got cut off a little bit there, Daman.
No, I was just saying that I really like my experience at York. Just
awesome.
with Renaissance engineering and the folks, pretty cool.
Awesome. Did you have any favorite courses at York University?
Most of my favorite courses are, I would say, the ones that I struggled with. It seems to be the ones that you kind of use often. I guess I seem to be using. But for me, it would probably be algorithms and software design. There's two courses I learned a lot. You kind of use them pretty. I mean, it's pretty much fine. Is the basics of what you do at work. So pretty useful stuff.
I see. Awesome. Would you say because of COVID, it's changed around your work or environment a lot?
A little bit. I think the sort of initially it was a bit weird in the sense that since a lot of things people and companies and organizations take for granted when it comes to like personal communication or like face-to-face stuff. Just take an example of like daily stand-ups. There's a lot of multi-channel conversation that is possible, but when you're in sort of a setting where you have to get everybody on a single Zoom call, you cannot have multiple people talking. Coffee chat interactions and all that stuff. So I think there was a little bit of weird period in the beginning, but then slowly companies and so especially my experience has been that my team sort of got used to it. So now we came up with processes to sort of make up for the things that we're losing on. Yeah, I think we're just adapted now. So
Would you
I
say
don't see much.
Amazon was a little bit ahead of the curve of COVID, above about around everyone else, moving everything to online?
Um, for me, I wasn't really a big shift, especially my team, because I was mostly interacting with engineers or like PMs or mostly staff that was offsite. Uh, so it wasn't very different. I'm not sure about people who actually had to operate or like, had to have like face to face, like I don't know, like contractors or clients, or they had to deal with it. Um, but yeah, I mean, Amazon in general, it's a pretty big company. So when things come down to sort of like at best, on a best level basis at the team level, so it's sort of the managers are responsible for figuring out the flow and the processes at that point. But yeah, it was pretty smooth, I guess. Like after a while, things got pretty smooth.
I see. That sounds good. We actually have a question here from the chat from Joe H. Out of all your years during university, what year was the toughest?
Oh, I would say for an international student, I feel like it's a bit different because I felt a lot of domestic students had a sort of step up in the initial years. I personally did not. For me, it was I'd say third year, especially with algorithms. Definitely felt the grind.
I bet everyone else feels the same.
Yeah, algorithms was
Yeah,
an
even
intense
now.
course. Yeah, third year was where things got a bit, crazy.
Awesome. Yeah, there's another question from Steve. What are some networking strategies you could share with us in regards to students looking for co-ops and intern positions?
Um, okay, so a lot of my advice, not sure how much it'll apply to the post-pandemic sort of setup now, but when I was in school, I got my first internship at Uber just through the co-op program, because we had a lot of alumni back in the day that sort of connected, and we were doing a lot of outreach, I believe, through the co-op program. So I sort of got lucky there as well. The best way is to, I would say, post pre-pandemic is mostly LinkedIn. Just be proactive. It's a numbers game at the end of the day. So especially the first one is a numbers game. So I remember I did like I think 150, 200 applications and got like four yeses, four or like five, something like that, like single number, single digit. Um, yeah, LinkedIn is one. We used to have a career fair, that one. I also used to go to the U of T career fair just because it had more variety and better fruits. Uh, and I don't know if they have that now. It's called Next Career. Uh, Apart from that, go to like lunch and learns, go to events that happen in the industry. A lot of companies do these open houses, so that's good. Yeah, just be proactive with stuff. Try out new things. Cold email people. Just get your step in, whatever it takes.
I see. There's another question here, but we'll ask some other questions before we get to them. Could you tell us a little more about your current company at Blue Crew?
Yeah, definitely. So I was at Amazon until like the end of last year, and I decided to work at a startup as my next step, just because I wanted to take some more risk with my life. I guess things things are going a bit too good, I guess. So Blue Crew is a pretty small startup. I think it's around 200 folks at the moment. It's a US company, and what we are trying to do essentially is create a platform for the gig economy. So when you think of, I don't know if you guys have ever worked a blue collar job, but when I first came to Canada, I like spent my summers at a factory. And the way I got that job was through like staffing agencies like Randstad, etc. And the way these companies work is they take your resume and then they, screen you a little bit, and then they push it up to other folks that are hiring, and then they do some stuff on their end in terms of like regulatory and payroll and all that. They manage a little bit of stuff, but it's a lot of manual things, as a one person just matching resumes and to job requirements, then calling people up and stuff. Um, so Blue Crew is trying to automate that. We hire crew members in the US on W2, which is payroll. So they're Blue Crew employees. And then we match them with places that need people for work. Um, Yeah, that's what it is.
Awesome. I think that's really informative. I'm sure all of our people watching this could use that. So yeah, let's move on to the next question. Can I ask you what what was like technical interview at Amazon like? Well, before that, actually, let's start with it. What's a technical interview, and how are interviews at tech companies a little different?
Yeah, so a lot of there's a huge spectrum when it comes to interviewing engineering graduates or like computer science
Mhm,
graduates in terms of tech positions. So some companies have like tech interviews, some companies have interviews, um, right? So, but most tech companies, they have like a pretty regular loop. I think I see the question, what's the criteria for passing the resume stage of Amazon Co-op? We'll come to that later. But for let's say for internships, usually you would have a screening stage, and then you have um, a phone screen, followed by an optional on-site. I'm not sure how things are working right now, but in total, there's going to be like around 3 to 4 interviews. And for full-time or like new grad positions, also you have like a screening phase, a couple of phone screens, and an on-site, on an average of like 6 to 8 interviews.
mhm,
Um, Out of these interviews, some of them are technical interviews where you're tested on like pretty common stuff. I'd say like it's very standardized across the industry now, but things are changing, I guess. I don't know, but it's like a little bit of algorithms, data structures, system design. But later on in your career,
mhm,
some companies might ask you early on. So that's the technical aspect of a tech interview. There's also behavioral interviews where they try to find the so-called culture fit. And there's also usually an interview regarding your experience, which is common for new grads, I guess, since you
mhm.
have had some time and experience in industry with internships. So these are the three main sort of aspects of a sort of complete interview loop. Uh, and yeah, if you want me to go deeper, I could. So with regards to the question, what's the criteria for passing the resume stage? It's I would just suggest get a referral in that case. um, because that makes life a lot easier. If you have somebody who's willing to vouch for you, uh, go ahead, ask them out. Just like I said, network with people, tell them you're interested in what they are doing and learning about what they're doing, and show some interest. Pass them your resume, tell them your experience, and basically, if you have a position you're interested in, just send them your resume, send them the link of the position, and ask them if they would be willing to refer you. That's the easiest way. Um, Apart from that, just talk to a recruiter, I guess, because you basically have to.
Mhm.
It sounds pretty bad, but you just have to stand out, because there's a lot of false negatives, and there's not a lot of false positives because people, companies don't want to have a lot of false positives, so they would rather have a false negative where they would reject you even if you kind of were fit for the position. So
Mhm.
just try your best to just get a step in. Uh,
It's really a numbers game, right?
yeah.
I see. All right, let's move. Oh, before I move on to the next question, I wanted to ask you, was there any particular stage of the Amazon interview that you felt it was the hardest?
Um, so for Amazon, it wasn't. I think it was pretty doable. I'm not sure. I think they've maybe changed things now.
Hmm.
Uh, but yeah, I think usually the onsite is the hardest part. So it sort of gradually increases. So the levels of
Hmm.
difficulty, like the screening, is supposed to be something that just um, it's a filter for folks that should see a person, I guess, or talk to a person, and the phone screen is another screening for the onsite. So usually the onsite is going to be the hardest one.
I see. Yeah, we actually have a couple more questions in the chat. How do you chase recruiters on Twitter or on LinkedIn, or do you have any tips on regarding that?
Oh, chase them. I just like look for them, I guess. That's mostly it. I guess. I mean, for I guess somebody who's in school right now, you'd want to go for somebody who's in the. So a lot of big companies have separate organization that deals with student operations or student hiring, and another one for like industry hiring. So you'd want to approach recruiters that have that in their sort of distinction. Apart from that, the easiest way I would say is to find which recruiter is part of the student operations is to go to career fairs. So those are the easiest ones. Find the companies that you like, see if they're doing any career fairs. Go there, talk to recruiters. I'm not sure if I've ever reached out to a recruiter on Twitter, but I would be interested to know if somebody has.
I don't think I've ever heard of anyone recruiting reaching out to Twitter either, but I mean, maybe. Yeah, next question's from Arianne. Do you have any tips on making the most out of your internship?
Yeah, make as many mistakes as you can. Something I learned a bit late. Fail fast. If you have stupid questions, make sure you ask those stupid questions, because trust me, I still have a lot of stupid questions, and I don't think they're gonna go away. So I used to try to, I guess, do things by myself, and kind of, in hindsight, things would have been way faster if I just approached somebody. So it's sort of a balancing act, in my opinion. Also, you might not have the same problems that I faced. But for me, I would say just make as many mistakes as possible, try things out. Internships is the way I would treat as an internship is something you could mess around with. Like the worst case scenario, if you mess around with your job, is you kind of get fired. But with an internship, I mean, you could always find something the next 4 months, and you kind of know you're going to be out in 4 months, so so might as well loaf around, just try stuff out, like try whatever you want to do, I guess. Just don't hold yourself back.
Sort of piggybacking on your point on making mistakes. I'm sure you've had, sorry, I forgot the word for it. What's the situation where you think you're a fake? Sorry, I forgot. It's on my tongue.
Syndrome.
Imposter syndrome. Sorry about that. I'm sure you've had imposter syndrome before during your internships. Do you have any tips on managing imposter syndrome?
Everybody has that a little bit, I feel like, because things never make sense. I guess you get used to it. You kind of realize that nobody knows 100%. Like there's always uncertainty. So if you're trying to get rid of uncertainty, that's not the right approach. I would suggest getting to learning to develop a sort of intuition of how much certainty will take you to the next step, or how much certainty is good enough to get the job done. Now, the difference between the work you do at an internship or maybe even at school and what work is kind of the objective. So at school, all my assignments were graded on perfection. But in the industry, it mostly comes down to whether the business is making money or not. So you might be a great engineer, but if you're not making money for the business, you're kind of useless to them. So at the end of the day, engineering is a compromise between a lot of things, and I think the biggest one is the business. So pretty much, yeah. I don't know if I answered your question directly, but you just have to get it done either way. Like it doesn't have to be a perfect solution. Sometimes I would go for an imperfect solution instead of a perfect solution. That's my preference. Depending on, it's a compromise. So a lot of people have imposter syndrome, but I feel like it's something that is manageable in terms of your perspective, how you look at your work.
I see. Just because you mentioned perfection, perfection is kind of like a thing that you always chase, but you can never get, right? Like, how did you manage your need to like try to be perfect and everything?
I don't think it was a real need. Like
I used
to approach, I used to like optimize for grades, but I don't think it really matters. I mean, I know it doesn't matter at all. What matters is in this industry, you want to iterate as fast as possible. So you want to be trying out things, whatever you're learning, try to build stuff, because at the end of the day, again, you're an engineer. If you're not building something, you're not engineering, I guess. So you might be reading stuff, you might have a lot of information, but see what the industry practice are, how the industry works, build stuff. That's the easiest way to learn. Make mistakes, build stuff, iterate faster. You will yourself see, okay, maybe like, I don't know how many later or like senior year students we have here, but if you look back at your code from first or second year, you probably, you know, get a lot of cringe, I guess. I don't know, because when I see my code like 2 years back, I'm like, what was I thinking? And I think it's going to be the case for a long time. That's everybody.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, so my next question is that a lot of first-year students who are applying to their first internships or co-ops, they seem to have a lot of trouble trying to put too much things on their resume, trying to put trying to over-exaggerate a little bit, trying to put like these little projects and then trying to make them look like more than they actually are. Do you have any tips on to first-year students who might be watching that how to make themselves appear more let's say more professional on the resume?
How resume tips? I am not the best person to. So I usually follow tips by. So I read an article by this guy named Laszlo Bock, Lazlobock. He was I think HR VP at Google. I like the way he sort of listed out how to, his tips on how to organize your resume and how do you construct a resume. And with regards to what you should put on your resume, a lot of folks say, make it specific to the position. I feel like that is something that is required for certain strategies, but I just didn't have the time for that. I just listed out the things that I was passionate about and that I wanted to work on. And if I got an interview, sort of, matched with my interest. And so that's the way. But with regards to your question as to how do you make it stand out, yeah, just you should. So at this point, I think first, second year, kind of have a sense of things that you were kind of into, you want to explore further. So take a step in that direction, do something, build something, even if it's like really small stuff, but just list out the stuff you learned. Organize it that way. Just put in small projects. That's fine. You have to start somewhere, and believe me, recruiters know that you're starting out, so they'll be obviously they'll take that into consideration.
This kind of sidelines into your response in this question. Do group projects weigh as much as personal projects when it comes to the hiring process?
There is no set specific sort of criteria or rubric that people or like HR has to screen resumes. Trust me, sometimes it's not even a person. You've heard of like screening, like PDF screeners and all that stuff. But it's to answer that question. In my opinion, if I was hiring again, group projects would weigh the same in certain regard, because going back to technical interviews, there's an aspect of behavioral interview where the company would like to know how well you operate in a team setting, because I would say all companies work or develop software within a team. So that's just how organizations are structured. And if you have experience working with a team, if you understand the practices of software development within sort of a team, that is very valuable. So that aspect of group projects is something that is also considered when you apply. And when it comes to personal projects, again, it's like your interest, what you have done, what the results are there, and your motivation and stuff like that, right?
I see. Just to set line off of that point, when going through interview processes, what would you say like the importance of ratio is between your own personal talent and then the ability to work with other people, like 60-40-ish, something like that?
I have worked with folks that are all across the spectrum, but I would like to work with somebody who can work with a team, definitely, instead of somebody who's maybe a rock star engineer, but not the best person to be working with. And
I see.
so it really, because it matters in the long term. Like if you think
Mhm,
of, I mean, you might be the best engineer, but in 5 years, a
mhm,
person who can work with people is able to motivate them and influence them to build
mhm,
stuff. Um,
mhm,
and five people are would always be more productive in cohesion than a single person.
mhm,
So it's in the long term, it's a better move for your career to understand and work together with people.
mhm. I see. Really, very informative.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, let's move on to the next question. Wait, there's another question in the chat from Ray. Where do you think you should start contributing to open source projects there? Because there seems to be a gap between university and these things.
I myself haven't really done a lot of open source contributions when it comes to that. Yeah, I'm sort of not the best person to ask. The only contribution I've made is a couple of bug fixes that I sort of discovered as I was working on some of the libraries or some code that had those open source dependencies. Um, but I would suggest picking something small. Like go for uh, don't just go for like Linux kernel right away. Uh, pick whatever like you're interested in. Like if you, let's say you're picking a JavaScript, you can always search for repositories with like stars, like a decent amount of stars. This sort of shows you um, how popular these repositories are. Go for repositories that have a sort of lenient sort of, I guess, review process. Um, because sometimes I know like open source can be very strict on what is accepted and what isn't. Yeah, I think it's again like it's something you comes with practice, I guess. Where to start.
Hmm.
You just have to start small, start with person projects within an area, and then as you sort of get more familiar with it, you'll come across some library that okay, wow, this is really useful. And then after that, you'll be like, oh, this is very useful, but it would be great if it had this thing in it as well, so because I need it. And then that's when you realize that nobody else is working on it. And when you ask somebody to work on it, they'll be like, well, why don't you work on it? And that's how you come across your first contribution. That's usually the way
Hmm.
or the path I have seen um,
Hmm.
with people.
I see. Thank you for that. Yeah, so I just want to divert the topic away from technical interviews into non-technical. What was your experience at Amazon going through non-technical interviews, like behavioral interviews and stuff?
With behavioral interviews, especially with like the big N corporations, it's
Hmm.
mostly, it's a pretty straightforward process. Like my process is right, a couple of days before the interview, what I would do is um, so I think okay, a couple of days before the interview, I would go and look at company values. So every company has its own company values or cultural values.
Hmm.
I'll try to read up on them, understand what they mean, get up some examples here and there on the internet. It's easy to find for big end companies. Uh, and then if you just Google behavior interview questions, you'll see like a huge list of questions.
Hmm.
So I'll just go through them and just in my head, I'll try to answer them um, adhering to those leadership principles. So let's
Hmm.
say, this question, when was the last time you had a conflict with somebody you're working with? Could you explain a little bit on that? So yeah, let's say there's some leadership principles, like hire and develop the best. If that's somebody that's junior to you, you would take out some time to pair program with them, and et cetera, right? So you can come up with experiences that you had that adhere to those leadership principles, and that sort of fits the rubric that the company uses to tick the box. Um, and it's a pretty straightforward process. And after that, right? So once you have answers to like the most common behavioral questions, you are
Hmm.
pretty much ready for those interviews.
Hmm.
But yeah,
I
so
see.
basically, get the list of behavioral questions, get the list of leadership or cultural values, try to
Hmm.
come up with answers that sort of match both of them, and you're good.
It sounds like for most for behavioral interviews, it's more just remember the questions and then spit out the right answer.
Yeah, I mean, you get so after, so it's again, interviewing is also a skill. You get better at
Hmm.
it as you do more interviews. So I
Mm-hmm.
still interview even if I'm not looking for a job, because just to
Mm-hmm.
stay in the game, I guess.
Yeah. Do you have any experience with the STAR method?
Well, what's the star? Is that the? I think I've heard star
It's like
used in.
a structured manner of like responding to behavioral based interview questions.
Oh, I think that's also something that was used with promotions.
I think it stands for situation, task, action, and result. I think, yeah.
Yes. So that's, yes, that's another way of organizing your answer. Yes.
I see.
If
Okay.
you could do that, that's just icing on the cake.
hmm All right. Moving on to the next question. This one actually comes from a younger brother who is an architectural major, but he's wanting to go into the to the engineering
Oh,
software engineering field. He thinks that some people are just born, technical, and some people are just born to be, software engineers, engineers, mathematicians, etc. What are your thoughts on that as a software engineer?
I I highly disagree.
Yeah.
Like outside of work, I'm not the same person.
hmm
I like to get out. I like to be outdoors. I like to be in the open. I like to, just be active in that sense. So I think I understand there's like a stereotypical image of a tech guy, but
hmm
you'd be surprised that a majority of the industry is not like that, and that's just because the way I feel like humans work is, again, like, philosophically, or like just psychologically, sorry, not philosophically. It's, you need balance in life, right? So a lot of tech, again, sort of leads you to burnout. Trust me, a lot of folks
hmm
get burned out very fast. Um, but no, there's you can. It's just, again, a skill. The basic knowledge is just logic
hmm
and understanding how computers work, just having a mental model of things. Um,
hmm
and it doesn't often really, it doesn't really take a lot of work either. I mean, there's a lot of folks that just go do boot camps, and I actually have worked with so many people that didn't have a formal education in computer science. A lot of
hmm
folks on my team right now don't have a formal education in computer science, but they're just amazing at what they do.
I see.
So yeah.
hmm Yeah. I'm gonna pick up a question from the chat here. What difficulty level is Leetcode-like questions asked during tech interviews? Are preparing medium level questions enough? Is bit operation important?
Again, depends on your level of expertise and sort of what role you're applying for. I would suggest for interviewing, in terms of co-ops and internships,
hmm
late stage intern, in terms of, like, let's say you go in your freshman or sophomore year instead of your uh, senior or junior year. Uh, and then new grad is harder. Industry hires are a bit harder. And then once you're
hmm
experienced senior developer, it's going to be harder. For somebody who's in let's say co-ops, I would suggest a little bit on the easy mediums on Leetcode are good.
hmm
Um,
hmm
someone, like basic tree traversals and all that stuff, um, basic DFS, BFS.
hmm
But then when you come to new grad, you kind of are expected to know some other patterns, like, dynamic programming, a little bit of graphs, etc. And then sometimes when you go beyond that, it becomes a bit more complicated in terms of, you also have to design things. You have to design something,
hmm
um, and combine it with like a suitable algorithm or data structure for that sort of use
hmm
case. Um, but the way to prepare this is not just like hammering lead code left, right, and center. Like, uh, understand the pattern. I think when I was interviewing, I just learned about this, like rocking the coding interview. This exists. Like, somebody told me. I was just talking about this talk with some of my friends, and they were like, "Yeah, there's stuff out there now that's makes life
hmm
easier." But so my approach of doing a tech interview, I had, like, again,
hmm
like a very structured approach where I would first go in. The person would tell me the question. I would understand the question, and then step one was understanding questions. Step two was coming up with solutions. And step three was implementing the solution. Step four was testing the solution. Step five was asking for other, time complexity, etc., other follow-ups. Now, step one, understanding the question, and this is, again, this is something that is in series. So you don't proceed to the next step if you've covered first step. So unless I understood the question, I would never go to coming up with solution, because that's just wasting time. And actually has happened. I was interviewing at Google once. And I spent, I think, 30 minutes out of the 40 or 45 minutes just understanding the question. The guy was pissed off. Like, why don't we just move ahead? But I think it's very important, because I would rather not have a back and forth, instead just understand the question and then go ahead. Because I don't, if I was hiring somebody, I would rather want somebody who's understood and came up with a solution, instead of somebody who like wrote a half-ass solution, I guess. Sorry for the language, but yeah. So that's what I would suggest. Like, I think that's a separate discussion on like how do you structure tech interview. But for co-ops, easy mediums for graduate students, I would suggest maybe get used to mediums at least, and couple of like the common hard questions, maybe like string manipulations or stuff like that.
I see. I hope that answered your question, Ray. The next question up is, there's a lot of people who go to, California for big tech. They work there for a couple of years, and then they quit, and then they go to a startup, or they start up and make their own companies. What do you think makes them leave such a great position? If, coming from a position perspective of a student, an undergraduate, it seems like you're giving up such a really nice thing.
I know I cannot say for them. I mean, I'm not in California. But I think it comes down to the work that you do, I guess, because a lot of big companies, it's at the end of the day, it is a big corporation, so you have that structure, you have that organization, things happen a certain way, things expected to happen a certain way. I personally, the reason why I moved to startup was so that I can have a big impact, and I could move faster, and I could iterate faster and build faster. So there's a lot of independence I have here in comparison to a bigger company. And I just felt that I just wanted to see things grow, instead of just build on existing solutions, which is mostly what you come across with big corporations. So I feel like it's a different experience, and it's a different fun, just seeing something grow from scratch, and being a part of it.
Have you ever considered starting up your own startup?
Oh,
or
yeah.
are you planning on to?
It's a long ways ahead. There's a lot of things that goes into starting your own company, especially a tech company. I mean, tech is just one aspect of building a business. There's way more that's involved. Building a business involves having business skills. So apart from that, you need to have you need to know your legal, you need to know your HR, you need to know how you're going to deal with the public, your investors, how you're going to find customers, marketing, and these are all skills that have, or industries that have developed very specific niches and specialities. So you can't be just a good tech guy and expect that, so it takes a lot of work. You need to build a good enough network of folks that you can rely on to, be successful, and you've worked with, you understand. So I feel like, yeah, it's a long ways ahead. But yeah, I'd love to do that if I, feel ready and have an
I feel like we
idea.
might have to do another workshop if once you've made your own startup.
No, it's long time. It's a lot of time.
Well, do let us know.
Definitely.
Yeah. So next question. Yeah. By the way, guys, if there are any questions, please send them in the chat. Don't be shy. Let's see. So I had one question in mind. One moment. Yeah. My next question would be, how did you know? Were you sorry? Let me rephrase. Did you always like programming, or was it something you grew up into as you entered adulthood?
Yeah, I think I just started learning to code as I grew up. I
Hmm.
wasn't one of those kids that was coding when they were 12 years old. Like, actually joined
Hmm.
university, and that's when I started coding.
Hmm.
Um, but
Any
yeah,
particular
I
reason
just
why you chose computer engineering then?
uh, no, I just ended up in it. To be honest, just I as an international student, I didn't really understand the distinction between computer science and computer engineering. I most likely would have gone for computer science now.
Hmm.
Uh,
I see.
but yeah, so that's yeah. Again, I just it was one of those things. I just wanted to sit on the computer, play some games, and have a reason, like I said. And but turned out to be an actual career. But it's
Hmm.
good because the reason why I like it is you kind of have to the way you build software is by understanding and learning about the domain. So the business domain is what actually makes money for the business. And I'm not really
Hmm.
interested in understanding. I mean, I have an interested in tech and everything. Like, I mean, I
Hmm.
actively go and see tech.
Hmm.
Like try to understand, learn about new tools and new technologies out there, new systems or new architectures and all that stuff. But at the
Hmm.
end of the day, the business logic is where the business actually makes money, and that's what I'm interested in personally, just to understand the the different domains that exist where technology can actually have an impact,
Hmm.
and try to make an impact there. Um,
I see. Okay. Awesome. So next question I would ask you is that, there's actually a lot of business majors, math majors, science majors, and biology majors, chemistry majors who are currently applied in UHacks right now. And the reason I would assume that they're, enrolled, applying to UHacks is that they want to get a programming experience. What advice would you give them to sort of pivot their direction into tech from their current majors and their experiences?
just start building this. Just you don't have to have a formal training in coding. It's not, there's not a lot of stuff involved. I honestly don't feel like degree should be 4 years in computer science.
Hmm.
Uh, in fact, like I think one of the most experienced folks that I had on my team at Amazon was a biophysics major,
Hmm.
and his work was amazing. So I think the fact that you have another, um, especially sort of you have an understanding of another domain or field of work is
Hmm.
at your advantage because you know how the industry works in that area, and the fact that you know
Hmm.
how to code, even if a little bit, you can just write
Hmm.
something that solves a problem in that case. Um, Getting started, um, there's a lot of you know blogs or articles online on just pick up a stack and just start building stuff. Start building something small. Have if you have an idea, that's step one.
Hmm.
If you don't have an idea, just Google things I could just build in a couple of days or weeks, um, and start working on that, I guess. Uh,
Hmm. Yeah, that's good advice, I think. Yeah. So my next question is from Steve from chat. Did you have a coding routine during your undergrad days? And if you did, what would be your tips on to undergrad students?
yeah, I did not have a very good coding routine. I mean, I don't think, but the way I approach things now is
Hmm.
uh, you have to have you should be learning constantly. I mean, even at work. So the way the industry is, you need to know things as they're changing for
Hmm.
you to be employable,
Hmm.
especially at work because you work with new tech every day. Like the stack I'm working at right now with is not the same with that we had at Amazon at all.
Hmm.
So start with your courses.
Hmm.
I mean, I don't have a specific routine, but right now, usually the way it works is I get up, I do some code reviews, and then I start my day with some meetings. I usually have a chunk of time where I just focus on coding and engineering work. And then I
Hmm.
have some chunk of time where I focus on ideas or like, other creative work like documentation or like,
Hmm.
writing up some architecture. Uh, coming up with ideas and systems and the state of the system we have now. And there's some chunk of time where I just read things and I go through the code. But if I was in school, I would obviously split it up differently because it's not the same. Start from your courses, what you're learning on, see, try to get through those additional readings. Go on the internet and see, what people have done. What's the state of that specific aspect of computer science, like operating systems, what exactly is out there, what's the difference between different sort of operating systems that people have made, like what open source Linux, and like what sort of distributions exist, why do they exist, how is it what's the architecture like, what goes into building an OS, maybe write your own sort of booting sequence or something of that sort. But that's actually a pretty good question. You need to be. I feel like if you are interested, you should form a routine. Like that's a really good point.
Sorry, Daman, I think you broke up in the past last 15 seconds. Could you repeat what you said?
Okay, yeah, I was just saying that that's actually a pretty good point on coding routine. Because it just helps if you want to learn and you want to enter something, you have to be consistent. And the easiest way to develop is to have some sort of a like chunk time just dedicated to building stuff, and have like a couple projects that are always running in your sort of bank.
I see. Yeah. So another question from the same person. What different skills apart from Git and GitHub are they expected to know to get into DevOps?
Oh, okay. I'm not sure if that's a so DevOps again is a very big field. It's I'm not sure, like that term itself. I don't know. I think it's used in very different connotations at different places. I don't understand what DevOps is: development and operations. So like organizations that develop and maintain code and support that code. So it's the same as like software development. But I think some organizations make a distinction between development and operations and use that term, which I'm not sure if that's what you mean. But if it's the latter, and you want to be on the operations side, like where you sort of handle deployments, releases, and all that stuff, have a good understanding of build systems, continuous integration and deployment, what sort of deployment environments you'd be working on. If it's like a container, sort of like a cluster of containers, or like it's a bunch of EC2s. If like what sort of different clouds you'd be working with. If you're on AWS or Google or Azure. So there's a lot of things to learn. I mean, Git and GitHub is mostly just the version control. The way software works is essentially somebody writes code, puts it in a central repository, it builds, and then it's deployed. Right? So there's things to learn in every step and every stage of the process. So I mean, yeah, I mean, I don't know if it answers it properly, but GitHub is one tool that is used in one part of the sort of process, but there's different stages and different tools for different stages.
I see. Hope that was helpful, Steve. Yeah, so I think we're almost approaching our time here. If you have any, like advice or tips to your fellow York University students, what would you say to them who are trying to make it into big tech?
I feel like with the pandemic, it's very hard to network. And I know like folks want to network with people in the industry, but I would suggest that you put as much emphasis on networking with your peers because they're going to be in the industry soon. So the best way, I think the most, if I would say, there's something that I really liked about university, and if I took something out of university, it wouldn't really be the courses or the work or the learning. To be honest, I think I could just pick that stuff, most of the stuff up from YouTube or somewhere else, especially when it comes to like computer science, right? I would say it's the people that I was working with, the fellow students, because like that networking or like forming those friendships and knowing those folks for like a couple of years and then seeing them grow and then join the industry and then we still talk to each other. So focus on that as well. Yeah, it's university is that sort of phase. You're in college, so have fun that way. Make connections with your peers. Um, Getting into big tech, it's it's not as hard as a lot of people make it. Like you could take a very structured approach. A lot of people have done it. I know like some people think of it as a coveted position, like big tech, big N. Wow. Um, but at the end of the day, I don't think that is something that you should make it as the only thing that you'd want to go for. The right, in my opinion, the right thing to sort of approach is sort of things that you're really interested in, you'd want to work on, and go for those. Try to optimize on learning and not just like just try to get in somewhere and then we'll figure stuff out later. Um, that works in some sense, but not the best thing long term. So like for some people, big tech is you know is more suitable, but for others, it not might not be the case. So it's not a one sort of solution fits all. But yeah, just become a part of the community. Interact with people, try to work on things, be proactive with your projects, approach people around you to work on your projects or help them with your projects, but just build stuff because that's exactly what you're supposed to be doing.
Wise words from the master. All right, Daman. I think we're almost approaching our time here, but thank you so much for coming over. It was really a great chance to talk to you. I'm sure everyone, who will watch this recording or hear in the live stream, really appreciates you, your wisdom and your knowledge. And yeah, just thank you so much for coming over.
No, definitely glad to be here. And I think you already shared sort of my networking, my LinkedIn or something, I guess. Okay, yeah. So
I
if
posted
you
it.
Yeah, perfect. That's fine. I'm
Yeah.
always happy to help other, York students, because I actually
Mhm.
want my alma mater to, grow. And yeah, if you folks have any other questions, you know where to reach me. Always happy to help
Mhm.
and happy to chat. Thank you for inviting me.
Hey, no problem. We'll hope to see you again soon.
All
Yeah,
right.
and if you guys have any questions, please do go ahead and connect with Daman on LinkedIn. Yeah, and then we'll see you on our next workshop, which is a recorded workshop of Echo AR. All right, guys. Thank you so much for coming over. All right, we'll see you next time. Thank you, Daman.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye bye.